I just want to start by saying I think that this article was very interesting and very necessary to read. I'm extremely surprised it's taken this long for this information to be passed down to me, and I'm sure a lot of my classmates could say the same. I think this is such a huge part in American history and history in general that it really shouldn't be glossed over, and there should be a much larger emphasis on teaching this in youth education. So, the first thing that surprised me the most in this article was the fact that even Black Americans who did not directly experience theft and violence were still continuously deprived of the ability to build their wealth in America. So, for example, many Black Americans were denied entry into labor unions and union jobs. There was racist hiring laws and racist policies that forced many Black Americans into service jobs, even if they had earned college degrees. Many Black Americans were legally relegated into segregated and substandard neighborhoods, as well as substandard schools, and this made it impossible to compete financially and economically against the rest of America. I think this surprised me the most because many of us were taught that in the 60s, legally, Black Americans were treated equally in this country, and that's just not true legally. You know, Black Americans were legally denied entry into labor unions. They were legally forced to go against legal hiring, racist hiring laws, and racist policies. And Black Americans were legally relegated into substandard neighborhoods and substandard schools. So I think that surprised me the most because many of us were taught that legally Black Americans were equal in America by the 60s, and that's just not true. A thing that angered me the most in this article is the widespread idea that with the passage of the civil rights laws in the 60s, racism was completely gone and the harm was restored, or the harm was fixed, and what was lost was restored. This is completely not true. These laws, while they did try to make Black Americans on the legal level equal, this did not it didn't fix anything. It didn't correct the harm or restore what was lost. There was still an extremely dark history, and its effects were not vanquished because of these laws passed. And I think that angers me because of how widespread this idea is that everything is fine after these laws were passed, and that's just not true. Um, the 60s it tried to guarantee black people rights. It guaranteed black people rights that should have already been in place. It didn't vanquish, again, it didn't vanquish the harm that was done. So that's why that was angering for me. Something that gave me the most sorrow was that many freed people, they tried again and again to compel the government to provide restitution and reparations, um, and every single attempt failed. I think this caused me the most sorrow because Black Americans were they deserved reparations and restitution, and they fought for it, and it still failed. And I can really empathize with that. I think I can't imagine how sad that would be to be working so hard to get these restitutions and reparations and just fail every time. I think that's extremely sad. From the article, it says, to this day, the only Americans who have ever received government restitution for slavery were white enslavers in Washington, D.C., who were compensated for their loss of human property. And I think that's just extremely sad and disgusting. That's the only restitution that was paid. Um, a thing that caused me the most anxiety in this article was the delay until death tactic that Darity and Mullen went over. It's basically a procrastination that Black Americans, once all the living victims of slavery and racial apartheid and racial terrorism have passed away, no reparations are owed. Of course, this isn't true. Reparations and restitution should still be owed, regardless if all the living victims have passed away. But it's still an idea that can be used against people in America. So I think it's just that causes so much anxiety because the time is ticking. So that's why the delay until death tactic caused so much anxiety towards me. One question I had that the authors didn't really go over was I kind of wanted to know the specifics and how much just ballpark how much this is going to cost the American government, as well as how much of an impact this money would cause. Because obviously it seems like this it would cause a huge impact, which is why the government is refusing to give these restitutions and reparations. So I would have liked maybe a little more detail there. That was just one question, a couple more questions that I had. Um, the one thing that I think one idea that I've had changed is the idea of reparations and restitutions as a whole. I was never against reparations. I just had never really learned about it or gone into it. I can clearly see now that it's necessary and important because wealth is so important in America that reparations and restitutions do need to be paid to Black Americans. So I think that's one idea that has changed. So, thank you.